What's up, guys? Welcome back. Today we'll be taking some inspiration from one of my favorite shows and making one of my favorite foods. When I first saw season 1 of The Bear, when Sydney made the Cola braised short ribs, I added that recipe to my notes, and it may have taken me a little while to get to it, but today I'm going to show you how to make these delicious braised short ribs. Meet me in the kitchen, let's make it happen. Normally I'm more of a Diet Coke guy, but the recipe calls for the real deal. So we're going with a cup of Coca-Cola. This essentially is going to cut through some of the acid that you get from the red wine and things of that nature, adding like a little sweet element and some unique flavor as well. All right, guys, first things first, we're also pairing this delicious short rib with a traditional Parmesan risotto. For that, we're going to need a stock. The beauty of that is a lot of the same ingredients that we're using for our braise on the short rib can be cross-utilized for the stock. So we have onions, we got carrots, we got celery, traditional French mirepoix. We're gonna go ahead and prep this. Whatever we don't use for the short rib, we'll throw in our stock pot. All right, guys, again, very simple Parmesan risotto here. We're gonna use a little shallot, a little garlic, a delicious homemade stock, and that is how we're gonna make our Parmesan risotto. Obviously, you need some good quality Parmesan as well, a little butter, and some arborio rice. Quick reminder, guys, all the specific measurements for this recipe can be found at MrMakeItHappen.com. Also a great reminder, or a great time to remind you, to go ahead and hit that subscribe button and the bell to enable notifications. Simple dice on the shallot. If you don't have a shallot, you can use an onion, no big deal. I actually had a couple in the pantry, so we broke them out. A little bit milder than the onion, a little sweeter. It's nice for a risotto, but a regular onion works great for a risotto as well. Can't go wrong. Dice up the shallot, dice up your garlic, and that is as simple as it gets for a risotto prep. All right, guys, one of the most important parts of a short rib recipe, in my opinion, is getting some good salt on the short ribs early. I like to do this 24 hours before we cook them. That's not an option for us today. So a couple hours will have to suffice today, but if you have the time, I would like to, preferably do this the night before. What happens is the salt penetrates the meat. This is a thick cut beef right here, so you want to get some adequate flavor in there. One of the best ways to do that is to salt them, or what's called dry brine, overnight. Through osmosis, the salt penetrates the meat and you have a more flavorful end product. So that's what the idea is there. Don't be shy with your seasoning. You want to go pretty heavy on the salt. For short ribs, I like to use only salt because the other seasonings are going to burn at high heat when we go to sear these, and we're adding plenty of seasoning after we get them in the braise. So adequate salt on all sides. And then we're going to sear them off. Nice hard sear, dark crust is what we're going for. That's going to add flavor, texture, and look visually appealing. All right, guys, so I always cook with wine, and sometimes I even add it to my recipes. What I like to do is sear the short rib and then get the veggies in there and then use the wine to deglaze. So here we have a nice Cabernet. Probably a little bit more expensive than I would typically cook with, but I can use the drink. So cheers to you guys at home. Nice dry red wine. If you don't drink and you don't want to use alcohol in this recipe, you just use beef stock. Cheers. I got my son doing that now after every sip of milk. All right, so the idea here is to get your skillet or Dutch oven ripping hot, smoking hot, and then you're gonna add some avocado oil, something with a high smoke point. Let that coat the bottom, and then we're gonna get the short ribs in. Press them down firmly to make sure they make maximum surface area contact with the skillet. That's gonna develop that beautiful crust. You also don't wanna overcrowd your skillet, because if you do, that's gonna drop the temperature, take longer to get that crust. So we'll do these in batches, probably 3 or 4 at a time. All right, so we have half of our mirepoix in here after we seared the short ribs. We're gonna go in with about 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. Then we're gonna deglaze with that red wine we have been sipping on. Then we're gonna go in with our Coca-Cola and a little bit of beef broth as needed, just to make sure we have enough liquid to submerge these short ribs up to about shoulder level, so to speak. And then we'll let them go in the oven at 325 for about 2.5 to 3.5 hours, depending on the size of your short ribs. Or you can do them in the pressure cooker in about an hour. Now, my friends, it's time to start adding some additional seasoning. I'm going in with my garlic, or my buttery garlic pepper seasoning, and a little bit of my all-purpose. We already adequately salted the short rib themselves. We got the flavor in there from the Coca-Cola. It's going to be very unique. Now it's time to get those short ribs back in there. And then add a little bit of beef stock, just enough again to get up to where they're about 3/4 of the way submerged. You don't want them to be boiling or fully submerged. Just enough to get them nice and tender is what we're going for. 2.5 to 3.5 hours at 325 in the oven, or 1 hour in the pressure cooker at high pressure. All right, guys, so for the homemade, so to speak, chicken stock that we're using today, we're actually going to cheat a little bit, use store-bought stock and doctor it up by adding the fresh veggies, the fresh herbs, the fresh garlic. We're also going to elevate the flavor a little bit with the Better Than Bouillon chicken base. You want to use low sodium or no sodium stock from the store. Just kind of cheat it a little bit, speed up the process. That way we don't have to spend 12 hours making a stock. We'll let this come up to a boil, then reduce it down to a simmer. Taste as you go, adjust the flavor to your preference. And while you wait, finish that glass of wine. All right, people, it's time to make risotto. If you've never made it, some people, will kind of label it as a difficult dish, or it can be kind of intimidating to some. Really, it's very simple. It's just all about the technique and the time that you invest into it, and just making sure that you cook the rice properly. First things first, though, we're going to go ahead and get some oil in the skillet, and then we are going to add our shallot. Once the shallot gets a little bit of a head start, we're going to add in our garlic. Right now, depending on what kind of risotto you're making, you would add in your veggies, or if you're using something like pancetta or bacon, you would add that early as well. Today we're making just a simple Parmesan risotto, so we're going with shallots and garlic to get the party started. You add your rice, toast that, deglaze with a little wine if you want to, or you can just use stock. The real key to risotto is making sure your stock is flavorful, because that's what's going to bring the flavor throughout the cooking process. You basically ladle in a little bit of stock at a time, stirring constantly until that rice cooks and absorbs all that moisture. The key here also is using the proper rice for risotto, which is arborio rice. You can find that at pretty much every grocery store. Got a head start on the shallot. Now we're going in with the garlic. So this step right here is basically blooming the rice a little bit. You're kind of toasting the arborio rice. It's going to puff up a little bit, start to absorb some of that oil and the flavor from the garlic and whatever else you have in the skillet. Give it like a good 2 minutes of kind of waking it up, so to speak. And then we're really going to wake it up with 1 cup of dry white wine. That wine's going to cook off rapidly. It's going to add a little bit of acidity to the dish, which is nice because there's a lot of fat and creaminess from all the Parmesan we're going to add later. So you need a little acid in there. So if you're not going to use any wine, I would recommend using something like lemon juice or something to that effect to kind of help you out a little bit and give you a little pop of acid on the flavor profile. All right, so the key here, guys, is to continue to stir. The rice is going to be absorbing the liquid and the flavor that is, coming along with the liquid. You just want to add about 2 to 4 ounces at a time, which is about a ladle full, and then allow the rice to, absorb it. It's going to be actively cooking during that time. And then once the liquid is either evaporated or absorbed, you add more. You do that process for about 20 minutes, and you're going to have risotto. Finish it with your Parmesan cheese towards the end, season to taste. You have a delicious, creamy classic on your hands that you can impress your house guests with, because people hear risotto and think it's super difficult to make, but you can master it at home with this recipe right here. All right, guys, we got the risotto just about where we want it. It's time to start adding in this final seasoning. And then, of course, the Parmesan cheese. You can't have Parmesan risotto without that. So we're going in with some of my AP seasoning. Gonna give that a good mix. Once this last ladle of stock is absorbed, we're gonna go ahead and start adding in the parm. The parm is gonna make the risotto extra creamy. It's gonna make it come together, give it that body that you're accustomed to seeing with risotto. And then we'll be good to go. At this stage, you can add in anything you want to. You could add in some frozen peas and carrots. If you want to make like a veggie risotto, you could add some mushrooms. Really, the risotto is a blank canvas for whatever you want. But today, the star of the show is a short rib. So we're keeping the risotto simple. Nice Parmesan risotto. It's going to be a nice complement to that short rib. All right, guys, so when you cook a fatty cut like a short rib in a low and slow process like braising, naturally there's gonna be some fat release. So I have this fat strainer, I got it from Amazon. All the fat rises to the top. So if your doctor tells you that you're a little overweight, tell him that. But the fat rises to the top, and then you can just release the good stuff down into the skillet. If you want to do it the old-fashioned way, we would reduce this for a couple hours until it gets nice and concentrated and thick. Or you can cheat it and do a cornstarch slurry, which is equal parts cornstarch and water. That'll thicken things up a little bit. I'm gonna bring this up to a simmer. Got a beautiful color going. You want to taste it and adjust as needed. One of the other tricks I like to do to something like this is add like a splash of soy sauce or Worcestershire sauce to give it like a little umami, a little unique flavor. But I want to taste it first to make sure that it needs that, because remember, we got the Coca-Cola in there. All right, people, now it's time to plate this up. We're going down with that Parmesan risotto first, topped with the short rib, topped with the Parmesan, topped with the chives, and can't forget the gravy, baby. This is the part where I say, brace yourself for a trademark money shot. Say it with me, guys, looking good. The only thing left to do is dig in for the taste test, but before we do that, please take a quick second to subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit that bell to enable notifications as well. All right, guys, I got my fork. The pot roast is as tender as a mother's love. Man. Cheers. I'm not really getting the Coca-Cola, but maybe it did something.
Working at the bear.
Don't tell them when you use a plastic fork.
Risotto, look. Rip.
I'm going to money.
What more can you ask for?